Washington, D.C., an early weekday morning. Sunlight pierced through the crystal-clear sky, glinting on the glass facade of the FBI headquarters. Inside, life moved with the precision of a well-rehearsed symphony, hurried footsteps, phones ringing in steady intervals, and quick, clipped conversations slipping by like lines of code. Agents moved with documents in hand, passing one another with cold glances and unwavering focus. This was the center of intellect, law, and power, a place where the unusual was dismissed before it even crossed the threshold. And yet that morning, something deeply unusual appeared, and no one noticed. At least, not at first. A dog, medium build, white fur tinted with the dust of the streets. Its coat matted with the imprint of storms and hunger. Its eyes were deep, black, and quietly sorrowful. It didn't scurry around for food. It didn't cower or flee. It simply walked, slow, deliberate, and stood before the FBI's massive glass doors. Then, it began to bark. Not a fierce, aggressive bark, not a whimper for help, but a rhythmic, urgent bark, as if knocking on some invisible gate. A bark that carried something pressing, a message beyond the language of men. At first, no one paid attention. A few agents glanced over, frowned slightly, then continued to their meetings, perhaps thinking it was just a stray looking for scraps. A security guard started to step out and shoo it away, but decided against it. Only one person stopped, someone who didn't know why, only that he couldn't keep walking. Brian, a young agent newly transferred just a few months ago, was on his way out to grab his first coffee of the day. But as he passed the entrance, he paused. The bark, it didn't feel like it was aimed at the building, but at him. He turned his head. The dog was looking at him. Not with fear, not with aggression, not with avoidance, but with eyes that pleaded, not weakly, but purposefully. Brian felt a faint tightening in his chest, a strange sensation. Familiar yet unfamiliar, like a gut instinct telling him something was waiting to be uncovered. And this dog was the key to it. He stepped forward, slowly, gently. The dog stopped barking. They stood facing each other, just a pane of glass and a few feet apart. In that moment, there were no footsteps, no car horns, only a silence. As if the world itself was holding its breath. Brian pulled out a small water bottle, poured some into its plastic cap, and set it in front of the dog. It watched him for a moment, then drank, not ravenously, not fearfully, as if it understood. This silent conversation was something serious. Then, as it finished drinking, the dog, who would soon be known by a name Brian didn't yet realize would be carved deep into his heart, gently took hold of his sleeve with its mouth and tugged. Not scratching, not barking, not forcing, but with quiet insistence. Brian whispered, "You want to take me somewhere, don't you?" The dog gave a small nod, or at least, in Brian's mind at that moment, it did. Upstairs, through the glass reflecting the morning sun, Special Agent in Charge Michael Daniels, head of the Eastern District Task Force, was watching everything with razor-sharp eyes. He had just wrapped up a meeting with the Department of Justice and was in no less than a serious mood. Seeing Brian crouched in front of a dog, Michael frowned. He tilted his head, peering through the window. "What the hell is he doing? Petting a stray dog in the middle of work hours?" he muttered. Then keyed his radio. "Brian, get back to work. Do you even realize where you're standing?" The transmission crackled through, but Brian didn't move. He was caught between two worlds, on one side, rigid orders, on the other. A pleading gaze no words could explain. The dog, whom he now quietly called Rex, was still gently holding his sleeve. Still tugging, but not forcefully, as if it understood, humans need time to move past doubt. And then, Brian stood up. One step. Rex moved forward too, turning back to look at him. Another step. No one beside him, no support, no clear reason, just an irrational trust in a gaze that spoke without sound. Michael shouted over the radio, "Brian, you're violating protocol. I'm putting this in your file." Brian paused for a second, then pressed the radio button and replied in a calm, resolute voice, "If I'm wrong, I'll take full responsibility. But if I'm right, then maybe we're ignoring something much bigger." And he turned the radio off. Rex led the way like a seasoned soldier. Despite his thin frame, dirty fur, and a slight limp, every step he took was steady, as if he had walked this path 100 times in his memory. Brian followed, eyes fixed on that small figure, partly out of curiosity, partly out of concern, but mostly because of something unexplainable. He trusted this animal. The city slowly shed its bustling exterior. Skyscrapers gave way to old brick walls, moss creeping along the base. The air grew quiet, filled only with the soft tap of shoes against pavement, and the steady breathing of one man, and one dog, on a journey no one could quite understand. "You had an owner once, didn't you?" Brian asked gently as he walked beside Rex. "Someone taught you to believe in people. The way I'm believing in you right now." Rex turned to look at him. No bark, no nod, but his eyes, deep, solemn, searching, seemed to say, "Yes, but now, I need you." Back at the FBI headquarters, Michael stood in silence. Beside him, Ryan Edwards, a technical analysis specialist, had also stopped in his tracks. "Where do you think he's going?" Ryan asked. "Following a stray dog," Michael replied, sighing. "But that dog's eyes didn't look like an ordinary animal's." Ryan stood still, quiet. "You once said, intuition is a luxury in this line of work. But what if, this time, the intuition belongs to a dog?" Michael didn't answer. He just kept watching the two figures turn into a narrow alley. Then motioned for Ryan to follow. "Bring a tracker and a firearm. If this is a mistake, I want to be the one to prove it." And just like that, 3 humans, and 1 dog, stepped into a deeper part of the story, where instinct overrules logic, and a single bark may be the first knock on the door to the truth. The deeper they went into the shadowed alleys behind the heart of the capital, the sunlight and their sense of certainty began to fade. Cracked walls, smeared graffiti, shattered windows like scars on the faces of forgotten buildings. No more honking, no more hurried footsteps from workers or civilians. Only cold air and the scent of rusted metal lingering in the atmosphere. Rex suddenly stopped. He stood before an old warehouse, tall, its concrete walls jagged like the hide of a wild animal clawed open. The rusted iron door was ajar, and the wind slipping through it let out a creak, like the long, slow exhale of a place the world had abandoned. "This the place, Rex?" Brian asked softly, his hand instinctively moving to his waist, where his sidearm rested silently in its leather holster. Rex nodded, not like a dog, but like a brave companion. He barked once, not loud, but just enough to echo through the tight space. A signal, a warning. Michael and Ryan had caught up by now. Michael eyed the warehouse, squinting. "We don't have a warrant. If this is a mistake." Brian cut him off, voice firm. "If we wait for the paperwork, whatever's inside might not be here anymore." A beat of silence. Rex stepped to the door, raised a paw, and gently scratched at the rusted gate. Nothing dramatic, nothing forceful, just a creature pointing man to what its heart knew better than any lawbook. Michael looked to Ryan. "Arm up. Be careful. No one acts without a signal." The door creaked open. A slow, dragging screech rang out, like a blade slicing through the air. Inside, darkness, thick and pressing, clinging to their eyes like tar. They clicked on their flashlights. Beams of light cut through clouds of dust. And then, all 3 of them froze. No one was prepared for what they saw. Dozens of rusted metal cages stacked against the walls. Inside were frail, emaciated lives, dogs, cats, even small foxes and ferrets, their eyes wide with terror, unable to distinguish day from night, man from monster. Whimpers, the scraping of claws against bars, the rasping breath of life hanging by a thread. Brian stepped back. Lucy, a young agent recently assigned to the team, covered her mouth. Unable to speak, only Rex stood still. He walked slowly toward a cage that held 3 tiny puppies huddled together. His eyes locked on them, as if to say, "I've done my part, now it's your turn." Michael took a deep breath. "We're standing in the middle of a trafficking hub. This isn't just a warehouse. This is a distribution point," Ryan added, his voice low and cold like a blade leaving its sheath. A sudden crash sounded from behind. All heads turned, weapons raised. 2 dark figures emerged between the shelves, guns in hand, shouts in a foreign language echoing. "We've been made," Michael barked. And just like that, the darkness shattered into gunfire. Screams, shouts, and ferocious barking. Rex didn't wait for a command. He launched himself toward one of the assailants, pointing a gun at Brian. A compact flash of white lightning, and sank his jaws into the man's arm. A shot rang out. Blood sprayed, but not Rex's, the gunman's. Brian seized the moment, tackled the man, cuffed him as his heart pounded like war drums. Lucy dropped to her knees, cradling Rex. His cheek was scratched, just lightly. But his eyes burned with pride. Like a soldier who had just reclaimed justice for his kind. When the last gunshot faded, a heavy silence settled over the warehouse. No more screams. No more footsteps. Only the soft whimpers of abandoned animals. And the flickering flashlight beams reflecting off tears, perhaps. For the first time, those animal eyes had glimpsed hope. Michael stepped to the center of the warehouse. His face hardened, no longer the strict department head, but a man confronting a painful truth. Rex accomplished something the entire system failed to see, he said quietly, his gaze settling on the white dog as Lucy gently wiped the scratch on his cheek. Rex didn't look proud. He simply sat there, silently watching as each creature was freed from its cage, as if to say his mission was complete. And the rest was now up to humans. Brian carefully unlocked one of the cages, where a trembling mother dog lay beside two pups who had only just opened their eyes. "I'm sorry that we came too late," he whispered. Lucy raised her comm device, voice clear and firm. "This is Agent Taylor, requesting immediate medical and forensic units to our current location. We've uncovered a major animal trafficking ring. Engagement is over. Live evidence requires urgent rescue." Ryan, still extracting data from a hidden control panel in the back of the warehouse, suddenly called out. "I've got the records. This isn't the only site. There's a transport map, federal routing, even signs of overseas shipments." Michael clenched his fist. "This won't stop at a single report. This is a major blow to an international smuggling network. Breaking news: stray dog leads FBI to bust interstate animal trafficking ring." The story spread like wildfire. Within 48 hours, evening broadcasts across the country showed images of Rex, once a filthy stray, now clean, with a blue bandana around his neck, eyes bright and calm. A photo of the dog standing tall during the recognition ceremony at FBI headquarters, with Brian and Lucy by his side, lit up social media. They called him names like four-legged hero, unregistered agent, the silent warrior of justice. At the ceremony, in a room hushed with emotion, Michael took the stage, his voice strong. "Today, we're not just honoring a mission accomplished. We're reminded of a greater truth. Sometimes, what we need most isn't in a report or a dataset, but in a well-timed bark from a loyal heart." He stepped down, carefully placing a gold-plated medal engraved with the words, "Bravery and Service," around Rex's neck. And in that moment, as if sensing the gravity of it all, Rex wagged his tail, and smiled. The applause thundered like a storm. After the ceremony, as the crowd slowly dispersed, Lucy knelt beside Rex. "Thank you, Rex. Without you, those hundreds of lives would have never had a chance." Rex just looked at her, his eyes deep enough to hold the whole world, saying everything. Without a single sound, Brian stood nearby, placing a hand on Lucy's shoulder, speaking gently. "We've still got a long road ahead. But today, it all started with something simple. A dog, and a bark no one bothered to hear. After all the gunfire, tears, and applause, a quiet, sun-drenched morning arrived. No more FBI sirens. No more reporters shouting questions. Just a small apartment with sunlit windows, and a dog lying on a soft rug. Eyes half closed, breathing as gently as the wind. It was Rex, once a filthy, emaciated stray barking outside the FBI headquarters, ignored by a sea of indifferent faces. Now he was living in a real home. With Brian, the first human who believed in his eyes. "Welcome home, Rex." Those were the words Brian whispered the first time he opened the door and let Rex inside. The apartment was small but warm, a soft rug, a brand new dog bed just for Rex, a bowl of clean water, and a few plush toys neatly arranged. But as always, Rex simply walked slowly through the space. He didn't pay attention to the toys. He didn't run. He just quietly followed Brian, step by step. "You're afraid that if you look away, I'll disappear, aren't you?" Brian murmured, kneeling to gently stroke the freshly bathed, soft fur. Rex didn't answer, he just pressed his head gently into Brian's hand. It was the first time in his life he felt peace. Learning, step by step, what happiness means. In the days that followed, Brian patiently took Rex out for walks in the park. At first, Rex remained cautious, looking around warily. He watched other dogs play but didn't dare approach. Once, he even flinched when a child clapped too loudly nearby. But with each passing day, Rex's eyes began to change. He started wagging his tail when Brian picked up the leash. He began running freely beneath the trees. And one day, he finally chewed on his very first toy, a sky-blue rubber ball Lucy had gifted him. "You're starting to believe you deserve to be happy now, aren't you?" Brian smiled, his eyes glimmering. Rex, more than just a dog. The news of Rex continued to spread. On social media, his image, wearing the bravery and service medal, was everywhere. People called him a living symbol of persistence and loyalty. But to Brian, Rex wasn't a symbol. Rex was a friend, a family member, the reason each day felt worth waking up for. "You didn't just save those animals in that warehouse. You saved me too, Rex." Brian whispered those words one night as the two lay on the couch. Rex resting his head on Brian's leg, eyes gently closed, as if, for the first time in his life, he finally understood. He didn't have to sleep with one eye open anymore. The real journey was just beginning. One quiet Sunday morning, as Brian and Rex strolled by the lake, Lucy came running up from the distance, a file in her hand. "We need Rex again. There's a new case, a missing kitten in a suspicious area. And, well, you know Rex is our top scent expert now." Brian laughed. Rex perked up his ears. Maybe Rex's new life wasn't just about peaceful days, but also about a new role as an official partner in FBI's special rescue operations. Because somewhere out there in the world, someone is still waiting for a bark to be heard. The story of Rex and Brian didn't end in a small apartment or in the morning news segments on national television. It spread fast and deep, like a flame reaching into the darkest corners society had long avoided, the illegal animal trade. The image of Rex, once a gaunt, filthy stray, now wearing a medal and carrying a gaze filled with resolve, became the symbol of a sweeping transformation. Congress takes action, the Rex effect. After the FBI raid on the abandoned warehouse, the seized documents revealed that this was only one link in a vast, multi-state criminal network, with ties that stretched beyond U.S. borders. When the media broke the story, the public was outraged. But what was remarkable was that the public didn't just get angry. They acted. Hundreds of thousands of signatures flooded Congress, demanding harsher penalties for animal trafficking and cruelty. A campaign titled, "The Rex Effect," was born, not just to honor Rex, but to protect all those without a voice. And then, just 1 month later, the Rex's Law bill passed, raising the minimum sentence for animal abuse to 10 years in federal prison, and mandating federal investigations for any suspected illegal animal trade activity. From symbol to inspiration, schools began inviting Brian and Rex to speak to students. But they didn't talk about the FBI, guns, or chasing criminals. They spoke of a dog who stood at the doors of a federal building, unable to speak, yet believing that his gaze would reach someone's heart. Never underestimate the power of a look that's asking for help, Brian told a room of elementary students, while Rex lay quietly at his feet, as if he understood every word. And those seemingly simple moments sparked something in thousands of people. A little girl started her own fundraising campaign for a local animal shelter. A group of law students proposed forming a legal oversight unit for animal rights. Adoption centers across the country reported that sign-ups for pet fostering and rescue doubled. Rex, not just a hero, but the beginning of a humane movement. In the letters sent to the FBI, people didn't just express gratitude. One handwritten letter came from a man who had once been part of an animal trafficking ring, now turned himself in. He wrote, "I wasn't afraid of the FBI. But I couldn't handle the way that dog, Rex, looked at me. I'd never seen anyone look at me like I could still be good." A legacy without a glass case. Rex doesn't live in a museum. There's no statue cast in his likeness. But every lawyer, journalist, volunteer, or citizen who speaks of the Rex effect knows. It is proof of the extraordinary things that can happen when someone whether human or dog, is truly heard. Brian understands that real legacy isn't made of medals. It's found in the dogs rescued from cages, the children who learn to value fragile lives, and the grown-ups who choose to stand for what's right, even when the first voice calling them forward was just a bark. A rainy night in Washington. The streetlights blurred behind the windowpane, their glow spilling onto the floor where Rex lay sleeping, his head resting on Brian's leg, as if both were savoring every second of peace. But then, the phone rang. And for Brian, peace became a thing of the past. We've lost track of a shipment of rare animals. It may have slipped into the U.S. by sea. Brian, you and Rex, we need you both. First clue. A cry in the night. Early the next morning, Rex and Brian arrived at an abandoned shipping yard on the west coast. There were no obvious signs of disturbance, but Rex suddenly froze in front of a sealed container, growling low in his throat, a signal Brian knew all too well. Something's wrong. Inside, they didn't find any animals. Just an empty cage, a small trail of blood on the floor, and a single long strand of fur, shimmering silver blue. Not the fur of any dog or cat. Forensics confirmed. It was fur from a North American lynx, a species nearly extinct in the East. The hidden smuggler and the ticking clock. Digging deeper, Brian discovered a hidden camera tucked behind the container's vent. The footage revealed at least 3 wild animals had been moved through this site. But only 2 were shipped out. The third? Vanished. At the same time, the FBI received an anonymous letter. Want to save what you'll never see in time? 48 hours. Or it's too late. Signed, Shadow Lynx. Rex, the instinct you can't program. By late afternoon, the air was thick with tension. Rex circled the docked cargo ships, ears alert, each step guided by something deeper than logic, a primal sense of knowing. Suddenly, he stopped, growling at a sealed metal crate. Freshly painted over, Brian immediately called for it to be unlocked. Inside, no animals, but a pair of dismantled GPS tracking collars. The kind used on endangered species in protected international reserves. They weren't just being trafficked. They were being hunted to extinction. A midnight chase in the silence of the sea. That night, Rex suddenly yanked Brian out of the car, sprinting toward a cargo ship preparing to depart. No alarms, no alerts from the system. But Rex knew. Brian followed close behind. And when they reached the rear cargo hold, a faint whimper echoed from the refrigerated bay. A young lynx, its leg caught in a wire trap, stared at Brian. Unblinking, as if it knew, this man wouldn't leave without saving it. Just then, 3 traffickers appeared. A brutal struggle erupted. And Rex, without a command, without hesitation, launched forward, blocking the armed man with fearless precision. Case closed, but the enemy remains in the shadows. The mission ended. The lynx was rescued and transferred to a recovery center. But Shadow Lynx left no trace. Whoever they weren't just a lead. They were something darker, more dangerous, more sophisticated, quite possibly the mastermind behind a global endangered species trafficking ring. We've only opened one door, Brian wrote in his case journal. But behind it lies a labyrinth. Fortunately, Brian isn't entering that labyrinth alone. He has Rex, a creature who can't speak, but understands things science still can't explain. Trust. 7 days after the port operation, an untraceable photo was sent to the FBI's internal mailbox. In the image, an adult lynx locked in a cage, a dense forest looming behind it, and a scribbled note in the bottom corner. The home of the forgotten Moonpine Sanctuary. No one in the office recognized the name, but Brian did. Moonpine, where time stands still. It was once a federally funded wildlife sanctuary, hidden deep within the Appalachian Mountains, nearly erased from maps after a forest fire a decade ago. And Brian knew it better than most. He had once been a volunteer there. He still remembered the place, not for its trees or wildlife, but because that's where he first met Rex. Back then, Rex was a stray, skin and bones, lying motionless beneath a charred oak tree. And in that moment, Brian had chosen to save a dog, instead of pursuing a suspect. Back to where it all began. The two set out in silence. No sirens, no helicopters, just Brian, Rex, and a dusty SUV rumbling into the heart of the mountains. Their first night at Moonpine, no voices. No lights. Only the sounds of the forest. The whispering wind, and Rex's eyes fixed on the shadows. As if recognizing something from a long time ago. They weren't alone. The night hunter and the blood-stained trail. The next morning, Rex led them to the old center of the sanctuary. There, they found rusted cages, some still stained with dried blood. Grass had yet to grow back, proof that it hadn't been long. Brian followed the tracks. Not paw prints, but military-grade boot prints. Interlaced with dog prints. Large, heavy, not Rex's. Rex let out a low growl. Then darted toward the edge of camp, the former research lodge. There, they found a map of the forest. Marked with strange symbols. Trap site. Staging point. Processed. A large-scale hunt was underway. But not for research. The encounter in the heart of the forest. That afternoon, just as the last sunlight filtered through the trees, Brian and Rex walked into a trap. A group of men, camouflaged, armed with tranquilizers and tasers, blocked their path. No badges, no names, just cold stares, and one chilling sentence. "You've gone too far. No one's supposed to come back here." Brian reached for his gun. But Rex moved first. A flash of motion, a ghost in fur. Rex's leap threw the group into chaos. One man swung a shock baton. But Rex dodged. Brian used the opening to subdue two of them. Wrestled a map from the ringleader's pack. And together, he and Rex vanished into the trees. Not to escape, to fight back. The truth revealed, Shadow Lynx was once a hero. Back at the old research shack, Brian discovered a hidden hard drive inside the wall. The data inside told the real story. Shadow Lynx was once a renowned biologist. Founder of Moonpine. But after the fire, government funding was cut. Betrayed, broken, and bitter, he transformed into the mastermind behind a global network of wildlife trafficking. A vendetta cloaked in vengeance. His goal wasn't just profit. It was to prove a twisted belief. Nature doesn't need saving, only domination. A wake-up call. Rex, born and abandoned right here at Moonpine, had now returned as a symbol of survival. He didn't need to speak. He only had to stand, still and steady, in the middle of the forest. Ears perked, eyes watching the horizon. And Brian understood. This wasn't just a mission. This was where it all began. And maybe, where it would all end. The rain fell. Heavy droplets pierced through the thick canopy, soaking into the cold, muddy earth, forming a dense mist that clung to everything. In the darkened depths of the Appalachian forest, Rex stopped. He lifted his head, ears perked high, then slowly turned to look at Brian. That look said everything. Without a single word. "We're here." The hidden entrance. Before them, concealed behind a moss-covered cliff tangled with vines, was a metal door. Rusty. No sign of human presence, but the scent of iron, the scent of blood. Brian took a step back. His heart pounded. "You sure about this, Rex?" he asked. But deep down, he knew. Rex had never been wrong. The door wasn't locked. Just a gentle push. And the past spilled into the present. The lair of betrayal. They stepped into an underground bunker, wide, dark, humming with the low rumble of ventilation fans. Lining the walls were steel cages, iron pens, and the quiet eyes of animals watching from within. Tigers, lynxes, silver foxes, even the elusive eastern timber wolf. On the walls, maps, documents, and a hastily scrawled message. "They rejected me. Now they'll witness how I reshape the world." Signed, Shadow Lynx. A low voice echoed from the far end of the chamber. "I knew you'd come back, Brian, but I didn't expect it would be for a dog." Shadow Lynx revealed. The man stepped out from the shadows. Camouflage jacket, long beard, eyes sharp as claws. It was him, Professor Elijah Grant, the brilliant biologist who once saved hundreds of species from extinction. Now the very man imprisoning them for vengeance and profit. "Rex is everything I once hoped humanity could be, loyal, empathetic, and incapable of betrayal," Brian said, his hand resting on the grip of his gun. Grant chuckled. "You don't get it. I'm not hunting them. I'm building a new order. Humans are the cruelest predators. I'm just giving nature back what it lost. The choice of justice." Rex's bark rang out, sharp, echoing across the bunker. He stepped between Brian and Grant, as if to say, "No one has to die." But the truth must be faced. Brian looked Grant in the eye. One last time. You have two choices. 1. Face prison. 2. Keep hiding in the dark while the world turns its back on you. There was no gunfire. No bloodshed. Only Grant, sitting quietly on the cold bunker floor. His hands empty. His eyes staring into the void. Like a man waking from a decades-long dream. The light returns. The next day, a full tactical team was deployed to Moonpine. The animals were rescued and sent to rehabilitation centers. Trafficking routes were decrypted, and the name Shadow Lynx was officially removed from the FBI's blacklist and entered into the federal prison registry instead. But a legend was remembered. Rex, the dog once abandoned in this very forest, had led justice back to the place it all began. And Brian understood something now. Deeper than ever before. Justice doesn't always need words. Sometimes, it just takes a loyal gaze. And a heart that never gives up. 1 month later, on Pennsylvania Avenue, in front of the FBI headquarters in the nation's capital, the sun lit up a morning unlike any other. Not because of the weather, but because a name was spoken aloud. A 4-letter name that stirred the hearts of millions across America. Rex. The ceremony of honor. Beneath the fluttering American flag. Before thousands of people. Thunderous applause filled the air. On stage, the director of the FBI stood tall. His deep, steady voice echoing through the microphone. Today, we do not merely honor a dog. We honor the spirit upon which this nation was built. Courage, loyalty, and the refusal to abandon what is right. Rex stepped onto the stage, walking proudly beside Brian, the man he had chosen to trust. Both wore formal honor uniforms. Around Rex's neck, a blue bandana adorned with the Federal Medal of Bravery, the first time in history such an honor had ever been awarded to an animal. The moment that moved millions to tears. When Brian took the microphone, he hesitated for a moment. But then, looking down at Rex, he smiled. I used to think I saved Rex. But the truth is, Rex saved me. And then, he saved an entire world we'd forgotten. A world full of voiceless beings, who still know how to love. Rex didn't need words. He only needed one look. And the world listened. The change begins. Immediately after the ceremony, national news outlets ran the story across the country. The U.S. Congress passed the Rex Act, increasing penalties for wildlife trafficking and establishing a dedicated federal unit for animal protection. Nonprofits reported a 3-fold increase in volunteers signing up to care for rescued animals. Small statues of Rex were raised in cities nationwide, not to worship, but to remind us, courage can come from any living creature. If only we choose to listen. An ending, and a beginning. That night, after the stage lights dimmed, the reporters left, and Washington returned to its usual rhythm. In a small apartment on the city's edge, a light remained on. Brian brewed a cup of tea. Rex lay on the windowside couch, moonlight glinting off his now clean, healthy fur. Brian sat beside him, gently stroking Rex's head, and whispered, "You're not just my partner. You're proof that sometimes, the greatest things come from the smallest beginnings." Rex didn't answer. He simply rested his head on Brian's leg. Peaceful. Complete. The final line of the story. Etched into legacy. Rex, the dog the world once forgot, taught us a lesson we must never forget. You don't have to be human to be a hero. You only need a heart that loves, and a soul that refuses to give up.